there, my name is Jean Tiberio, and I'd like to welcome you to Healing Outside the Box. This is episode 248, and I'm calling it, Is There Such a Thing as Brain Food? And how do we measure it? If some food is the opposite of brain food, what would that look like? And while we're at it, what is intelligence? It is assumed that someone who is good at math is intelligent. But what about social intelligence? Like being able to understand the complexities of human nature or the ability to read people's emotions. What about artistic intelligence? Is the right brain less valuable than the left brain? Is there actually a right brain and a left brain? They're both equally important, I think. But someone really should have told Picasso that women have only two breasts, for God's sake. Is the left brain more important because we can measure it? I don't know. In junior high school, I realized that the left or math brain can be scored, and therefore, I guess, more important. But I believe that we are not doomed to fail at either one. I think I was in the 7th or 8th grade. I don't know which, but I do remember this specific day like it was yesterday. I parked myself in the classroom, in the desk that was furthest away from the teacher that was empty. It was by the window and the second chair to the back of the room. The back row was for the kids with absolutely no interest in anything but goofing off. But if I was supposed to be a math whiz, why was I trying to hide from the teacher? So I wouldn't be called on. Full stop. I was trying desperately at the time to climb out of my Aspergery tendencies, and one of them was to never have to speak out loud in class. I also remember eating a tuna sandwich for lunch every day for the whole year and seldom spoke out in class when my name was called. That particular day, my teacher screwed me totally by telling the class to guess what grade each had received on the already graded test that he was about to return to us. How could he be so cruel? I swore that he knew or must have known what would happen to me after I was forced to guess. Or maybe he didn't. After all, kids that are good in math and considered to be smart should be complimented, right? So, one by one, going up and down the entire aisle, the kids took guesses until he got to me. Head down, gazing at my hands, I stiffened and braced as I said, "Eh?" while still staring at my hands. The teacher made some comment about how it really wasn't much of a guess, but all I could hear were the snide remarks and barking from the other students, who were mocking me and calling out all kinds of names. Then I felt something hit me in the back of my head. Someone had made a paper airplane and flew it into the back of my head, but it didn't end there. Around that time, I sat down by myself one day to eat lunch on one of those long lunch tables. And as I sat down, everyone else seated at the table picked up their tray and moved to another table. I once got my food thrown on the floor. I was waiting in line another time, and some kid in the lunch line pretended to write a mock poem about me. How my hair was like spaghetti, etc., while the other kids looked on and laughed. When I turned around, the teacher was just looking on and saying nothing as well. So nobody had my back. Also around that time, I was outside the school grounds, and some boy ran up to me and kicked me flat in the chest with his boot. I had a bruise right in the center of my chest, but never told my parents because I was so ashamed. What this taught me was that being brainy was bad and being normal was good. I started to intentionally write down wrong answers to the math problems and stop doing my homework. The next year, we were all asked to do an oral book report, but instead of doing the oral report, I wrote down the book report and offered to submit the book report in writing. My teacher was very displeased and said, "If you don't get up here and do this oral report, I'm going to give you an F." To her surprise, I nodded okay and got the F. I eventually started turning it around in the 11th grade, but I still ended up graduating in the top 15% of my class, but not the top 5% as perhaps my father would have liked. My competitive nature eventually took over, and I got into a good college, only, strangely enough, to see myself as a dumb fish in a smart pond, and to wish I was as smart as my roommates. It took years, but eventually I came to the realization that learning is good and that knowledge is something that can never be taken away from you. It was undoubtedly my odd temperament that made me a bullying target, and eventually I learned to live with that as well. Fast forward 40 years to the present, where I lovingly grasp on to every little brain cell in my noggin and thank God for what I have been blessed with. Anyway, as we get older, I believe that most of us would think that short-term memory is as good as anything to define the functioning of our brains. That might be simply because this can be evaluated easily and can be scored. One of my favorite, if we can say that word, moments of the Trump administration is the cognitive test that he aced, as he said. He was asked to remember a 5-word memory challenge, and he said you get extra credit for saying the words in the proper order. Person, woman, man, camera, TV. He clearly showed us that he was, quote, cognitively there, wherever there is for him. It's also very helpful on a day-to-day basis to remember where we put our car keys and how many fingers we are holding up when we say the words 4 more years. I'm referring to George W. Bush, and he was in fact holding up 3 fingers. Being increasingly forgetful has become a sign of our own aging, which clearly no one is happy about. Let me say at the starting gate that there is no one food that will be a magical fountain of youth. But possibly we can hedge our bets and remember more or forget less with certain foods and lifestyle habits. So let's go over a few of these dietary recommendations for brain health. Most people put omega-3 fatty acids first, but I'm going to put roots and fruits. So number 1, roots and fruits, or fruits and roots. Let's start with the fruits. When you hear just about anyone encouraging antioxidants, they will usually mention blueberries. But other berries in the blue, red, dark purple categories will also work. The healthy pigment is caused by a group of substances called anthocyanins. So red grapes, blackberries, strawberries, cranberries, and acacia berries are also good for you. When it comes to acacia berries, the pulp or puree is better than the filtered juice. Now these berries fight the damaging effects of inflammation and oxidation in the brain. When we're young and healthy, our brain is efficient in cleaning up cells that are either toxic or no longer working. Inflammation and oxidation in our brain cells are the reason that this cleanup is necessary. This makes room for new healthy nerve cells to communicate. As we age, this cleanup process works less efficiently, hence the need for anti-inflammatory and antioxidants in our diet. Animal studies done on blueberries have shown the key group of substances in berries, as we now know as anthocyanins, help memory and may delay age-related short-term memory loss. And while we're still on the fruits that are high in vitamin C will also work, because vitamin C, or ascorbic acid, is another antioxidant, which means it fights free radical damage in our brain cells. So oranges, grapefruit, tomatoes, red and green pepper, broccoli, mangoes, cantaloupe, and watermelon are all good sources. Ditto for the berries when it comes to vitamin C. If you're interested in brain health, and I assume you are, you can't eat enough fruit as far as I'm concerned. Okay, now for the roots, or root vegetables. Carrots, beets, sweet potatoes, even red onions are good sources of substances that can improve your brain health. As you can tell by the color of the vegetables I've mentioned, the red-orange colors give you the anthocyanins that I mentioned when I was talking about the berries. Garlic and ginger are also considered in the root vegetable family and are in the good for your brain category. These root vegetables are good sources of both vitamin C and vitamin A, both antioxidants. In addition, there was a study from NIH that looked at red onions and diabetes control. It found that red onions helped blood sugar control in both type 1 and type 2 diabetics. Again, theoretically due to the antioxidants and anti-inflammatory compounds in these root vegetables. I'll give you a link to that in the show notes. Number 2 on the brain health list are prebiotics and probiotics. Now, prebiotics are the fiber that your beneficial gut bacteria need to grow and multiply. Mostly, they're what we call soluble fibers. They include broccoli, asparagus, green beans, regular beans like pinto, black beans, kidney beans, and whole grains. So your beneficial gut bacteria like to munch on these soluble fiber foods. Broccoli and similar vegetables contain a lot of antioxidant and anti-inflammatory substances as well. They're also rich in vitamin K. We call that group cruciferous vegetables: broccoli, red cabbage, Brussels sprouts, etc. Our beneficial gut bacteria also like the skins of apples, pears, peaches, and grains like oatmeal and quinoa. Now, probiotics refer to the actual beneficial bacteria themselves, which can be found in our fermented products like sauerkraut and yogurt. The third item on the good for your brain list is fatty fish, or more specifically, omega-3 fatty acids. This is one of the reasons that health experts tend to promote the Mediterranean diet. By the way, the Mediterranean diet won the best diet of the year for the 4th year running, according to U.S. News & World Report. They ranked the Mediterranean diet the best and the keto diet the worst. I'll give you a link to that article as well. If you scroll down that page, there's a link that allows you to plug in your personal preferences in all of the food groups and get a Mediterranean diet meal plan tailored to you. And it's free, of course. People generally think of salmon when it comes to omega-3 fatty acids. But there are omega-3 fatty acids in many different types of fish: cod, sea bass, mackerel, tuna. There are actually several omega-3 fatty acids, but the one that is essential, meaning that it must be obtained from food, is called linolenic acid. And while I'm on the subject of food, scientists have discovered that taking omega-3 fatty acids in the food rather than in pill form is the way to go. Now, our brain needs omega-3 fatty acids to build brain cells and neurons, or nerve cells. The nerve cells are those long cells with 2 funny-looking ends that transmit information using electrical impulses. So thoughts are actually electrical impulses traveling from end to end with something called synapses between the neurons. Feeding our brains with plenty of omega-3 fatty acids have been shown to help this process along in slow age-related decline, as one might see in dementia. A lack of omega-3 fatty acids has been linked to slowed learning and depression. One study found that people who ate baked or broiled fish frequently actually had more gray matter in their brain. And who doesn't want that? Once they're out of junior high, that is. Okay, number 4 is nuts and seeds. For example, pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, and basically nuts of all kinds. Nuts and seeds are high in vitamin E, and that's a fat-soluble vitamin that has many functions, including healing, skin, and eye health. Vitamin E is actually the most potent antioxidant and is quite the little scavenger of those free radicals. Now, free radicals not only age your brain, but they are a separate risk factor for cancer. There's been a lot of research regarding vitamin A and vitamin E when it comes to reducing your risk of certain cancers. And if these substances get rid of toxic and/or debris clogging up your brain, it makes sense that it would be beneficial for both brain function and destruction of those free radicals and inflammation that can lead to cancer. Nuts and seeds are also good sources of the second essential fatty acid, linoleic acid. The first, as I've mentioned, is linolenic, which comes from fatty fish. Both of these essential fatty acids need to come from food, but these essential fatty acids are also key players in brain cell growth and function. Number 5, medicinal herbs and spices. The top of the list here is turmeric, which I'm sure many of you have heard about. I did an episode on nutrition-related food supplements, and it's episode 241. I'll include that in the show notes as well. Turmeric is discussed about 6 minutes into that episode. Curcumin, the active compound, boosts brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a type of growth hormone that helps brain cells grow. It may also help delay age-related mental decline, but more research is needed to secure the evidence on that. They're specifically looking at curcumin in terms of reducing amyloid plaques that are found in Alzheimer's patients. There is an interesting article about this and other anti-inflammatory compounds, and I'll put that in the show notes as well. Now, ginseng and ginkgo biloba have been studied and have been found not to be effective for memory or overall brain health. The only other spice that is linked to anti-inflammatory properties is ginger, but I mentioned that in the root vegetable category because it is actually a root, and it's a good one. Number 6, we have dark chocolate. Now, I was going to leave this out because dark chocolate actually doesn't have a lot of antioxidants, but it has some, so we include it on our do eat this list. Flavonoids are a group of antioxidant plant compounds that can be found in dark chocolate. Now, last but not least, coffee. The caffeine does actually perk you up, and because of that, makes you more clear-headed and alert. The effects will last about 6 hours, but there are no long-term benefits. While we are on the subject of beverages, I would quickly add green tea to the list. Green tea contains an amino acid called threonine that increases the alpha brain waves in our brains. The theory is that that particular substance is what creates that relaxing effect. Although it's hard to prove, my opinion is that this might help someone who suffers from chronic stress and therefore a chronic increase in inflammatory reactions in our body. We call it the cortisol effect. As you may recall from episodes I did on stress, chronically high levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, can increase the inflammatory response, which ages all cells. Green tea also has some polyphenols, which can theoretically slow cell aging. There's not a lot of these chemicals in tea, but what the heck. It's a nice beverage, so why not? Now that wraps up the foods that are good for your brain health. The foods that would be bad for your brain health, not surprisingly, would be the opposite of what I've just mentioned. Added sugar and highly processed foods are on the top of the list. Processed deli meats and saturated fat in general are not great. Trans fatty acids, also not great. So solid margarine and shelf-stable cookies and desserts, not great. Small amounts are probably not harmful. And let's face it, no one eats perfectly. But a steady diet of all of these not-so-great foods can start adding up over time. In addition, you may want to watch your use of aspartame, which is equal or NutraSweet. The NIH article on the foods to avoid also mentions limiting alcohol and avoiding sleep deprivation. I'll give you the link to that NIH article in the show notes. So, that all was a mouthful, so I'll stop here. If you have any questions or want assistance in adapting some of these healthy habits, feel free to email me on my website page, Healing Outside the Box. Click Contact at the top. You could just ask me a question or sign up for nutrition counseling. I'd love to have you. And don't forget, if you haven't already, just click subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast app, and you will get notified when I have new episodes pop up. That's all I have for you today. Be well and stay tuned next week for another episode of Healing Outside the Box.